Hi, and welcome to HNB Conversations with Cosmo and Rivka.
Hey, everybody. Hope you've had a great week and had a great Sukkot. And we are glad to be back with our podcast. And we're going to open with our international greeting.
Were we not doing? You said we're welcome back to the podcast.
Well, it's been a week.
Oh, okay. I was like, did we take
I
some
was
sort
just
of
saying,
hiatus that
yeah.
I didn't know about?
I was just saying something.
Okay. All right. So the word for this week is from. It's in Bengali, which would be Bangladesh, and I believe it's pronounced namaskar.
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 I'm going to go with you on that. I don't know, but I believe you.
And so, what are the
Well, Bangladesh,
information?
Bangladesh is in South Asia. It's actually it's just to the east of India, kind of northeast of India, south of Tibet, that area, southwest of China. And I read here that it is the 8th most populous country, and it is among the most densely populated countries, with a population of around 200 million people in an area that's 57,000 square miles. So, yeah, that makes me wonder.
We don't hear much about that. We hear a lot about India.
Well, I remember hearing years ago that Bangladesh was actually one of the poorest countries in the world.
One of the poorest?
Some of the most impoverished in the world. So I'm curious, how many square miles is the United States? Because if they have 200 million people they have 200 million people in 57,000 square miles. We have 330 million people in 3.8 million square miles. They have 57,000 square miles, it says. We have 3.8 million. It's like $57,000 versus $3.8 million.
So
it's a big difference. We have a lot of land with just about a third more of the people than Bangladesh.
Right.
They are squeezed in tight.
I wonder how they got that many that fast.
Well,
I don't know that it's fast.
I know how that happens.
Well, no, I know that as well.
Well, I mean, you look at that whole region, right? I mean, you have over 1 billion people in China to their north. You have over 1 billion people in India to the southwest. So, I mean, there's a massive...
Like, that whole part of the world is just very populated.
Is very populated. I mean, you think about 1/4 of the world's population is in those two countries.
Wow, that's a tight squeeze.
Yeah. So, but if you were to say hello to any of those 200 million Bengali people, how would you say it again?
Namaskar.
Namaskar. So that's a useful word.
I'm probably totally butchering it, but that's what it...
It
didn't even give me a pronunciation, so I'm assuming that's the way you say it.
That's the way it transliterates, right? All right. Okay, so we are ready for our first question of the day.
All right. Let me spin the wheel. Okay, it's almost done. And the question is, as you grow older, what is one quality that you hope to grow stronger in?
As we grow
As I grow older, what is one quality that I hope to grow stronger in? Mm-hmm. Oh, boy, I really... I hope to grow stronger in... I would combine it with... Boy, there's so many qualities. Obviously, wisdom, but I think a wisdom that's displayed...
I mean, wouldn't you want to grow older with, like, a lot of qualities?
A number of qualities, right? I mean,
Getting
there's so
better?
many.
I mean, if you had to pick one, that means,
But if
like,
I have
what
to-
are the other ones are not
Yeah,
gonna
so
get
I'm looking
stronger?
for a big... So wisdom is sort of all-encompassing in many ways because...
This is a quality, correct?
I would think it's a quality.
Right? Is that what the question said?
Yeah, I believe so.
I mean, for me, I would think of a kind of empathy and kindness. Like, as I get older, I hope to become not less kind and less empathetic, but I hope to become more understanding, more aware.
I guess for me though, what's the definition of a quality? Is that a character
Characteristic.
trait?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
A good one.
Right. Clearly. I mean, you certainly don't want your negative qualities getting better. You'd be going in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick one. There's so many that I'd love to get better.
Right. So many of them, but I think what I would really like to grow in is a more natural concern and understanding for people, for where they're at. So, sometimes when you get older, it seems like like historically, I think of Dennis the Menace, his neighbor, Mr. What's his name? You remember Mr. Get Off My Lawn kind of thing.
Yeah, I know you're talking about, but Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, thank you. That would have been driving me.
I was going to say, I have no idea. I don't remember. And all of a sudden I heard Dennis the Menace in my head going, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, so I don't want, characteristically, the stereotype is that as we get older, we get grumpier, right? That we get angrier. Well,
some people do. Some people don't. Some people do get kinder and softer. Like life kind of wears you down in a sense, like the sandpaper of life.
Right.
And so people can get, it's not that they get better, they just kind of get softer, more understanding, kind of like, well, this is sort of what happens. But there are those people that seem to forget what it is to be, I guess it's just how life affected them. They forget what it was to be a kid. They forget what it is to struggle. They see themselves in their past as having been like they know they weren't perfect, but they think they were certainly better than anybody today.
In this generation kind of thing. Yeah, and so I guess what I hope is that as I get older, that the experience that comes with getting older, with the all the experience of life, would give me a perspective that would put things in their proper place, that I'd be able to see things not being a prisoner of the moment, but that so in particular, where that really matters is in the way that we deal with one another, and so that I hope to have relational wisdom, so that I would in increasing measure. Then so that I think of empathy, I think of being able to understand, to recognize where someone's at, and to recognize their feelings and what they're going through, and then to respond to that in a kind way. I would love that to become a more natural quality in me as I get older.
That'd be nice. I mean, that's a good quality to have, is what I'm saying. For me, I think it would just be self-discipline, just because I have a really hard time with that. Like, there's so many things that I want to do, and I go and do them, but when it comes to myself or taking care of, like, exercise or food, or, I'm like, I'm going to do it like this, and I don't know. I would like to actually grow with self-discipline.
And like to follow, like the discipline to follow through.
With myself.
Yeah.
With myself. I do it for other people.
Sure.
I do it for my kids. I do it for us. I do it for, if people need anything, I just tend to not do it for myself.
Yeah.
And so I would like to do that better, as far as like, there are people that are like, well, I need to be a priority, or there's that whole, if you were on a plane and when something happens, you put your mask on first, and then you put on, whether it's your child's or someone else's mask. And I've been told that like forever, like, you need to make sure that you're taking care of you, but it's just not a thing that I grew up with. Mm-hmm. So I would like the self-discipline to be better at caring for myself.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think those are good qualities to have.
Sure.
All right. So may we...
That was an easy answer.
May we increase in those qualities as we age.
May we, yes.
May we age.
Yeah, aging is good. Aging is good. It means we're not
still alive.
going to stop aging. Yeah.
Exactly. May we age with wisdom, with kindness and discipline and empathy. And,
yeah. All right. We have another question, because that was really easy to answer.
Here we go. I'm spinning.
All right.
The wheel is a-turning.
And that's exciting stuff, Antonio.
All right. You both grew up in believing homes, but how old were you when you gave your life to the Lord, and what was that like afterwards with your daily life?
Oh my goodness. Did we answer this question?
No.
We've never answered this question. We've answered so many questions now, and I feel like sometimes they're similar to one another that I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways we probably in
Well, I guess
so
when
many
we were
arenas of our lives we've told this aspects of this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll let you go first.
Oh no, you can go first. I gotta think because I think I've probably
Okay.
gotten saved. I don't know how many times. honestly, like I remember it was. Yeah.
I can recall being 4 years old at Coleman Assembly of God in Coleman, Florida, and going up to the front and singing "Into my heart, come into my." She's hurrying me up.
Well,
Lord
and
Jesus,
you just don't need to sing the
hold
whole
on.
song. Like
Come
we get it.
in
Oh my
today,
gosh.
come in to
Okay,
stay.
Cosmo.
And so I remember, and I gave my heart to the Lord, and prayed that prayer, and then I was baptized when I was 10 and filled with the Holy Spirit, baptized in the Holy Spirit that same year. And then when I was 11, a combination of things happened. We changed churches, and
And you fell away from God, and it
we
just
did. Well,
took 30 years to bring you back. That's what it sounds like. It's like you're
when I was
telling
11, no, listen, I was 11, and we were in a really good church, and we changed churches, and we went from a really dynamic church to one that was in our little town because we wanted to support the new pastor. It was a church with 5 pews on each side. It was tiny. There wasn't really a kids program. And I was 11, and at this particular church, you had the children's ministry stopped at 10. It was, and the youth ministry started at 12. And I'm like, and I was 11, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I was like, and I didn't want to be in the children's ministry. I wanted to be in the youth ministry. And they were like, sorry, we have
What kind of a church does that? What kind of a church is like, we go to 10
tell you
and
who
we
does
start
it.
at 12, and so there's nothing
there was
for
a
an
new,
11-year-old?
They had a new youth pastor that they brought up from the Southeastern College. And so the guy had to be 21 years old.
Sure.
And so he was, I don't know what his thinking was. This did inform me as to how I led as a youth pastor, because I vividly remembered this experience.
Sure.
And was like, this doesn't make any sense. He goes, well, we have to draw a line somewhere, and so that's where we draw a line. I said, why don't you back that line up, because you've left me completely
Right,
out.
but what about the children's ministry? Like, couldn't
I
they have
was-
gone to the age of 11?
They could have, but number one, I was at that point.
But, yeah.
I didn't, and so I was angry. So that happened. I was angry and then in school I'd gone to junior high, and you're in the middle of adolescence, and so I just began swearing, and I just was angry with the Lord. I got involved in I was exposed to other things,
So you weren't serving God.
and I wasn't serving God for the time I was 11 and 12 and really 13. And then around, and so someone could look and go, oh, well, you were just a kid. But I know this. I was cognizant of what I was doing. I knew what I was doing. I wasn't walking with the Lord. And I would, probably when I was 13, and I wanted to start to do right things, let me say. I was like, okay, I need to stop swearing. This is stupid.
I want to do right things.
Yeah, I just want to, so I was, I defined that I was a believer by what I didn't do so I wanted to stop swearing and things like that. But I wasn't really hungry for the Lord, wasn't passionate for the Lord. And so the summer of 1990, I was 15 years old. It was between my freshman and sophomore year of high school. At that point, I'm not struggling with any of that stuff, but I'm just not really serving the Lord. So, and we have a good youth pastor down there. So we had a youth retreat. We went up, and I remember we go up to do this youth retreat. We're going to go whitewater rafting on the Nantahala River in the mountains of North Carolina. And so we get up there, and we're in these cabins, and then so they show us the schedule for the week. And the schedule has we're having services, like a morning session and an afternoon session and an evening session.
Like camp?
Like camp. That's what it was. But I didn't know. I thought we were going whitewater rafting, and so I was like, ugh, good grief! It's like we're having services all the time, and so that first night we were at a service, and I remember we were outside. It was beautiful in the mountains, and I'm just sitting in a rocking chair. I'm feeling like there's a buzzing going on.
Yeah, it wasn't me.
It feels like something is, but I'm still feeling. Anyway, sorry.
Okay.
If it's coming through the podcast, I apologize, but none of our phones are buzzing.
It sounds like your computer is like set up with
I don't know. Anyway, so I sat there that first night on kind of a rocking chair while everyone else is worshiping, and I'm just sort of like not interested, not engaged, just dry as a bone, not hungry for the Lord, not hungry to be hungry, just nothing. And
not hungry to be hungry.
Yeah, like I wasn't even like, oh, maybe I should. I just was like, no.
You were apathetic.
And I remember the second night. So then, the second night I had been up at the top of the hill that I'd called home. I was on a payphone, and by the time I came down, I was late for the service, and everyone was worshiping, and I decided to stand up and for the first time in probably, because when I was like 9 and 10 and I was filled with the Holy Spirit, I was passionate for the Lord, but I let the anger.
The anger of there not being a class for you, that affected you that deeply, huh?
No, it wasn't that. It was, I was angry about moving churches, honestly.
Oh, okay.
I was angry about leaving all of my friends behind.
And why had you needed to?
The youth pastor at Brooksville Assembly of God became the senior pastor at Bushnell Assembly of God. We lived in Bushnell. We lived down the street.
I see.
And so
followed the pastor.
So my parents wanted to be a support to him as he's 31 years old, his first pastorate, and so they felt like, okay, this is good, and I understand that now.
Sure, yeah.
And
no, I don't think you're still holding resentments about your 11-year-old self.
I'm okay. And so I think it was a combination of things. I just had become, that was the launching point. I wasn't still angry. I was over it. I was just, and I don't think I expressed my anger either to my parents. I didn't complain about it. I just,
I think when we're kids, we don't often, it's not until we're older teenagers that we realize we even can have a voice.
And so, anyway, I can't say why. I just know, that I stood up in that worship service, and I raised my hands for the first time in probably 4 years, and just for reasons I just began, like it literally felt like there was a wall around I felt this wall around my heart just kind of crumble, and there was joy and freedom. There was like a newness and a freedom within me. It was a palpable experience to me, and I repented and I surrendered to the Lord, and it wasn't in response to any. It was just the drawing of the Holy Spirit, and so then I can remember even the next day. Then when we had our sessions, and then you'd have to go and kind of journal or something, that I remember sitting by this little brook and singing that song from Salty, how I want to be, Lord, just like you. And so that song is intimately tied to that, what I really consider my salvation experience, because it was from that day forward that I was like, I'm going to follow you all the days of my life, Lord. And I wanted to, that's where I developed that, over that next year, I read my Bible. I began to read my Bible. I began to develop a prayer life. I began to, to carry my Bible to school so I could share with people just as, and the Lord began to do a real transformational work in me. And in fact, then going into that year, that's when my friends from in high school abandoned, I wouldn't let them cheat off my tests. I wouldn't let them do things. And so and then they started getting into drinking and this kind of thing, and I wasn't interested. So suddenly I found myself one day sitting alone in the lunchroom, which for me was like torment, but it was during that year. I mean, I know this is my salvation experience, but it was during that sophomore year of high school that was really painful for me. I felt so isolated. But that was where I actually became really strong in the Lord. That's where I would come home from school, and my home felt like this spiritual haven. Nobody would be home. My dad would be at work. My mom was still driving home from work. My sister wasn't home yet. And so I'd come home, and this was when there were new like praise and worship tapes and CDs. It wasn't a regular thing in the 80s,
Right.
It was like, and so my dad,
I think my mom had tapes.
she
but-
probably did. I wasn't aware of them. Let me
Sure,
say this.
right.
And so there were a bunch of them at the house that I discovered. My dad had them because they had been sent to him by Hosanna Integrity for the prison and whatnot for him to use there. And so he had them at the house too. And so I would come home and I'd begin to listen to this praise and worship music. And that's really where my relationship with God began to develop. So
That's a really beautiful story.
That's me.
I mean, it's like not a story. Like that's a good story. I mean, like that's a really, it's very clear and defined. Like you remember, and you have this really powerful emotional experience and all of that. I don't have that kind of story.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe something's wrong with me. I just remember, I know for me, like Giovanni got saved, like truly saved at 3 years old.
Right.
Like it was like life changing.
He stopped throwing fits.
He stopped throwing fits. I mean, he went from being a terrible temper tantrum person and was just all over the place. And then I prayed with him. He received Jesus into his heart, and he truly had a transformation. And he was 3.
However, he did throw a fit at Silver Dollar City.
Well, that was he got saved after that.
Oh, was it?
It was after that.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he had not yet been sanctified. So my story is, I mean, I don't know that there was ever one. I mean, I have lots of stories of these incredible things that God did in my life, but it just feels like for me, this has been like one long journey. When I was little, my mom would talk to me all the time about Jesus. They were, in ministry, and for my parents, they were the first generation of their families to get saved. And so it was this really big deal. And not that it isn't a big deal, but it was this really emotionally powerful thing that changed the course of history for our families,
Sure.
And so when I was little, young, my mom would talk about Jesus and how when she got saved, it changed her life. And she found that she had a best friend, and it was like this really amazing thing. So I don't know when I started asking Jesus to come into my heart, but I did start at some point. I just remember like going down to the altar many times. I can hear my brother in my head going, "That's because you had to get saved that many times." But I remember one time we were at this church, and there was an altar call in the children's ministry, and I went down and I asked Jesus to come into my heart, and when my mom came to pick me up, they were like, "Oh, we have such good news for you." And they told her, she asked Jesus to come be in her heart. And my mom was like, "Yeah, she does that at like every church we go to," because I was waiting for this powerful, life-changing thing that my mom had said happened to her.
This emotional
Yeah.
experience.
And because it wasn't happening, or I don't know how sinful I was before that. My mom would probably tell you that I definitely needed Jesus, but of course we all do, but
But you noticeably did.
Okay, I'll just own that. I noticeably needed the Lord. But I remember just really wanting this movement. Now it was the 80s. And so everything was like powerful. You went to a service and it was powerful. You went to church and it was like all of these things, but I wasn't getting like any of that. So I really wanted the Lord. I really wanted the Lord to come live in my heart, but I wasn't feeling like that. I was having that major, major moment. And the only thing I can remember is, because, I just did that for a very long time. And, but when I was, I think 9 years old, my mom took me to this, it wasn't a tent revival service. It was in a building, but it certainly felt that way. And so I'm in there, and I would sit and listen. We would fall asleep at church. My mom would have us there so long, for different speakers and conferences and everything. I remember crawling under the pews.
Me too. Rolling.
Yeah, like
Rolling
because you
from
could
front
go.
to back.
Yeah, you could go straight down, especially if there was an angle, like a little bit of a slide.
Yep.
And if there were no feet in your way, you could make it all the way down. You didn't think about the fact, though, that at some point you were gonna have to stand up, and if I stood up when I rolled down to the bottom.
Oh wait, you did that during the service?
Yeah, during the service.
Well, that was for afterward when mom's in choir practice.
No, this is probably why my mom was like, "This child needs the Lord." No, like I couldn't focus. It was before
I didn't do
you
that
could
during the service.
I know, it was before. I'm sorry, Antonio. I think you get it from me, actually. Now that I think about it, I had ADHD from a very young age, and it was undiagnosed. And so I was very all over the place, touching everything, I couldn't focus. We talked about that on the podcast.
I did.
Yeah,
we did.
So stupid stuff like that. Like I did dumb stuff. And so, I would have thought there'd be I think that you look at a kid like me and you're like, yeah, she does need the Lord. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to trust that he's in my heart, I guess. But I remember when I was 9, we went to this revival service and the guy was preaching. And of course they do the altar call, and they're doing the altar call for being filled with the Holy Spirit. And my mom's like, come on, let's go down. And I recognize as a mom the desire for your child to be filled like that with the gift of speaking in tongues and all of that. I'm not naturally a in front of people person. If I can stay in the background, if nobody ever sees me, like I'm perfectly fine with that. And so, not that that's what God has for me, but I would be perfectly fine with that. So she really wanted me to go down at the front, and I really did not want to. I don't know. I guess I'm just a little too self-focused even back then, but I just didn't want to. It felt embarrassing. And she was like, Rivka, come on. And I was like, no, I don't want to go down. She's like, Rivka, come on. And so she was like trying to drag me down to the front. My mom is a force of nature. She's like, this is a need. And so she will make it happen. And so I needed this. And I don't disagree, but she was really pulling me down to the front to where finally one of the ushers or something came up and was like, ma'am, she doesn't want to go down. She doesn't want to go. And my mom, I remember being super irritated with me, was like, oh, fine. Okay, fine. And looking at me like, you little sinner or something, I was just like, okay. I did not want to go down. And I remember that night I was in my bedroom and I got tucked in because I'm only 9 years old. And I'm lying there and I was just talking to the Lord because I would talk to him every night. Mm-hmm. I would have major conversations with the Lord. I never felt like I had this massive move of the Holy Spirit in my life and all of these things happen.
Paul get knocked off his horse.
Yeah, I would have loved that. No, I would. Well, actually, I have had a similar experience, but it was later on in my life.
Sure.
So I was lying there and I just said, Lord, I really didn't want to go down to the front. But if you want to fill me with the Holy Spirit to speak in tongues, if you want to give me that gift, you can give me that gift. And instantly I was filled and I just immediately erupted with speaking in tongues. And I was like, oh, okay. And what I learned in that moment was, you don't need all of that.
You don't need all the histrionics and
well, people can have a massive move of the Holy Spirit in their lives in the privacy of their bedroom.
Sure.
It doesn't have to always be, at a big meeting. I think a lot of people like the big meeting. Me personally, I loved the privacy of my room. And so I remember that happening, but I still after that, I really struggled. I had, my learning disabilities and ADHD, and nobody understood that. And so I was in trouble all the time, all the time. I was in the principal's office all the time. I didn't do well in school. And I think in those days that was a like when you had those issues, like people would be like, she doesn't pay attention, she daydreams all the time, the things that we recognize now. But in those days, I think they would have seen that as me just being like, honestly, this like bad kid, and there were people that told me, you're a bad little girl, and you start to believe that. And then but I did on some level, I don't remember having this like this, I always loved God. I always had a relationship with him. I could always talk to him, but I remember not always feeling like it was this legalistic thing of, and I'm not saying like you were legalistic.
Sure.
I'm
but
saying
this clear moment.
But this legalistic thing of like, I have my salvation wasn't defined in what I did or didn't do. It hadn't been defined to me like that. It was just, you ask the Lord to come live in your heart, and then you have a relationship with him. I wasn't a bad kid. I was very, very sheltered. We didn't watch television. I got to watch cartoons on Saturdays. If we didn't have services on Saturdays, I was in bed every night by 8:00. So I went to Christian schools, so I had a pretty sheltered life. And then we, I knew when we went, my parents took me at 14. Was I 14?
Yeah. Or
13, I think, because I was 14 when we moved to Israel.
Yeah, you were 14, right? You moved to Israel in January of 89.
Right. So what is it? Previous, so it was right before my 15th birthday. Anyways, so we moved to Israel, and I was excited to move to Israel. I knew that the Lord had spoken to me when we went on a tour there. I knew the Lord had spoken to me who I was going to marry. I knew we
That's
were,
me.
yeah, I knew we were going to move to Israel. And I knew all of that before my parents even told me we were going to move there. I had gone home that evening and I had told them the Lord told me I'm moving to Israel, and my parents had just been invited to move to Israel. So, but then once I got to Israel, it was a very, very different environment. It was incredibly secular, and I had grown up really, really sheltered. And I was already struggling with identity because I wasn't Jewish, but I was raised Jewish. We were Messianic, so we weren't Christian and we weren't Jewish. And then I moved to a country where I didn't even know how to say yes or no in. My name was Rivka, but I wasn't Jewish. Like I always had to, if I didn't tell somebody I'm not Jewish and they found out after the fact that I wasn't Jewish, they felt like somehow I had deceived them or
just by
tricked
telling
them.
him your name.
My name, I lived in Israel. My name was Rivka, and everything I did.
Why would anyone think otherwise?
Why would anyone think otherwise? So that was hard for me, and I think I kind of lost my way in the sense that whatever trajectory I had been on, I was now off of, and I was on a different trajectory because they weren't my choices. This was just what I was doing. Kind of like you didn't have a choice of what church you were going to. Your parents just took you to a different church. So as a teenager, I just really decided I don't like this. I don't care for this. I really like what I'm seeing in the secular environment. I like my friends. This is a lot of fun. So I really began to just rebel. I began to rebel against my parents. I began to rebel against the Lord. And I say rebel against the Lord because I knew that I wasn't serving God. And I had a moment in my bedroom where I was getting ready to go out that night. And there was no drinking age in Israel at the time. I don't know if there's one now, but there was no drinking age in Israel at the time. And we would go out on Saturday nights and we would have tons of fun. I didn't get drunk and stuff, but we had tons of fun and we would go to clubs and everything like that. And so I remember one time I was getting ready to go out and I really heard the Lord say, Rivka, what are you doing? Where are you going? Why are you doing this? And I looked up because I could always hear his voice throughout my entire life. There's only been 2 times where for me, he went silent on me. I could always hear his voice. And so I looked up and I said, leave me alone. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And he didn't go silent, but he let me go because that was a choice I was making. And so, and that's a really scary thing to think about, the fact that I was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing and leave me alone. It was a very conscious choice, and thank God nothing happened to me and he protected me. And, I had my high school boyfriend and I was doing what I wanted to do. And I don't ever remember feeling bad about it. I don't remember feeling convicted. I don't remember feeling bad about anything. I remember being really, really happy. I remember enjoying my life to the fullest because honestly, I was feeding my flesh. I was doing what I wanted to do, and it feels good. I mean, I had no guilt. I didn't feel bad for what I was causing my mother in heartache. I didn't feel bad for whatever if my dad was, worried about me. I didn't worry about any of that. I just did what I wanted to do. And so I did that until I was like 17, and we went to this conference, and I'm sure my mother was like, I remember my mother in those days being like, your prayer, your what is it called? Like your not your prayer language, but your prayer life. Your prayer life never gets as strong as when you're praying for your children, right? So I'm sure my mom was like, really, really worried about me and
interceding
and yeah, and all of that. So we went to this conference thing, and I was just angry. I was angry because I was angry. Oh man, I got to tell you this. I know this isn't about salvation. However, I pulled so away from the Lord. Watch, people are not going to like me after this. I pulled so away from the Lord. And when you pull that far, when you pull, like, you're either with the Lord or you're not with the Lord. There's no middle ground. And I think a lot of people think, well, I'm okay. You're with or you're not. And I was not with the Lord. And I was in full rebellion. And rebellion is as witchcraft because you are serving the enemy. You're not serving the Lord. And so Jonathan and I, because Jonathan was a lot like you. Jonathan's my younger brother, who everyone thinks is my older brother, but I was born first, and he's 18 months younger than me. And Jonathan was a good kid. Like, Jonathan took his Bible to school, and he was alone because, I remember him being kind of brokenhearted about how he was alone, and he felt so lonely, and he had his Bible with him and everything. And I admired that. I thought that was really nice, but I was like the extreme opposite, where he had like nobody. I had friends. Where he was alone, I had people around me all the time. And he didn't seem very happy to me, but I was. And so one day there was this fight, and I can't remember. I might have been sneaking out. I might have gotten caught somehow, but my brothers would always go inform my parents as to what I was doing for the most part. So then I was in trouble. And this time I was in trouble again. And I was really, really angry. And I remember we are in the living room of our home, and I am yelling and I'm angry, and my mom's yelling at me. Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was just totally grieved. I don't know. Jonathan is like sitting on a step, and he's concerned. He's like, it's almost like a protective, angry concern. Like, he wasn't angry with me like we were fighting like siblings. He was like, what are you doing?
He's angry about this. What's going about the situation?
Like what are you doing with your life? Like, what why? So he had told on me, and I was really angry. And I remember looking down at myself. I was no longer like present in my.
It's like you could see yourself.
I could see. It's like I could see myself from outside of myself, and I could see my mom, and I could see my brother, and that's still how I see things.
Maybe that's
now.
where the phrase "beside yourself" comes from.
Maybe.
Anyway, go on.
So, but I wasn't beside myself as in like grief or hysteria. I remember looking down and being able to see myself, and I walked over to my brother, and I was really angry. I walked over to my brother, and I leaned down and I whispered in his ear, "You will leave me alone, and you won't do this again, or I will come to you and slit your throat in your sleep."
And the podcast got real dark real fast.
I remember my brother looking at me with such like, oh my gosh, like he was, and I too, looking down when I did that, I too was like, what is happening? Like, what? And I turned around and I walked upstairs to my room. And as I'm walking upstairs to my room, I'm thinking, what is happening right now? Like, that wasn't me. I don't remember making the conscious thought of doing that. I lost so much self-control, and I was in so much rebellion, and there was so much influence over me that I really was not controlling myself at all. And whether I think there are people that be like, she was demonized. I don't know about all of that. All I know is my experience in that situation. So I was really
Sounds
angry.
like it.
I was really, really angry. My brother was terrified of me. I think he started sleeping with his door locked and all of that. My poor brother. He's such a good guy and a good kid. I don't think there's ever been a moment in his life where he wasn't like good. And I don't think I inherited a whole lot of that. But so we went to this conference, and I was at the back of the sanctuary. And the room was filled with everybody from all over that part of the world that would come to get ministered to, because you're missionaries from everywhere and stuff like that. I'm afraid to actually say the word because it was such a taboo thing to say. Yeah. So I'm at the back.
In Israel, you're not. If they find out you're missionaries, they'll expel
kick you out. Yeah,
So
it's not an open. It's a
the-
closed country.
Right.
So I remember standing at the back. And the Lord, you know how he knows our hearts? So exteriorly, and I'm feeling all this rage and anger and all that. But deep, deep, deep down inside, I did want him.
That little girl that talked
just
to
kept
him
getting
every
saved
night
over and over again and
was
talked to
still
him.
deep
And
in there.
yeah, I mean, right. And so I did want him. I could not get to him. I could not find him because I was so lost. And so I'm standing there and I'm so angry. And I remember I'm at the back. I've got my arms crossed. I have that 17-year-old attitude face, I'm sure. I would never, ever want to know me, to be like, the reason I struggle with teenagers is because I remember when I was a teenager and I wouldn't have liked me as a teenager. So I was standing in the back. My arms are crossed. I'm so angry. And I said to the Lord, you know what? If you're so real and you're so great and you want me, then I want that pastor, and this guy was in the middle of a sermon and he's preaching and everything. I said, I want that pastor to stop preaching, to walk down here, to lay his hand on my head, and I want to hear from you. And instantly the preacher stopped preaching, marched all the way down the aisle. I mean, I was terrified. I was like, oh no. He came marching at me. He laid his hand on my head and he said, daughter of God, you need to repent. And I dropped to my knees and I was like, okay. So I did have that major thing.
Well, I haven't had a real experience.
Well, I mean, it was like, so. And from that moment on, the Lord began to just work in me. I was not an overnight work. I wanted the Lord, but it was a struggle. Some people can be delivered instantly, and I think it took me a little bit. But then the Lord took me to the United States, and, I went through a great deal of pain. It's all a part of my testimony. I went through a great deal of pain, and then the Lord, wherever he told me to go, though, I would do, and I would go, even if I didn't want to. And then I gave him all my choices and my whole will and everything.
I think the story of what happened just before you and I met in your prayer closet there is another significant.
Right. Yeah. But that's when
So you can share that.
I think I have. when we were talking about our lives. Well, I was serving him. I lived in California for a while, and I had gone to Minnesota to go to school for a year. So I had. My boyfriend and I had broken up. We had been that I had in Israel. That was really, really hard for me. We were high school sweethearts and we'd been together all through high school. So that was really, really hard for me. I was now living in Minnesota, going to a Christian school. I missed Sukkot and the high holidays and couldn't believe, I looked at my calendar and those holidays had gone by and I couldn't believe that somehow I didn't just know that they were taking place and, oh, it's Sukkot and, oh, we need to do this. They just went by and no one even informed me. So I was in this really Christian environment for the first time in my life. And I was, again, really struggling with my identity. Who in the world am I? Am I Greek? Am I Jewish? Am I American? I just couldn't figure out who I was. And so I finally decided, okay, you know what? My name is Rebecca on my birth certificate. So I am Rebecca Gannon. And what? Becky. No, I am not Becky. It was going to be Becca, if anything. I am not Becky. Anyway, so I just decided I was Greek American and my name was Rebecca, and that's what I decided was who I was going to be. And I lived on my own, and then my mom and dad came back from Israel, and my mom told me, they were moving to where were they moving? They were moving to Missouri.
Yeah.
They were moving to Missouri, and she's like, Rivka, I really think you should come live with us. And I said, yeah, no, I'm not leaving California. I had tons of friends. I really liked my life in California, even though there were some really painful moments. And my mom's like, no, I really feel like the Lord's told me that you're going to move to live with us. And I was like, no, I'm not. And she's like, look, just pray about it, okay? Just pray about it. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll pray about it. And the second I said, okay, I'll pray about it, I knew instantly I was moving to Missouri. And I cried, I think, for 3 days. I so did not want to go. But I ended up going to Missouri. And in Missouri, I was miserable. I was missing my friends. I didn't have a church. I was isolating myself. I think I was really struggling with depression on some level because I really did not want to be there. When people say that when God calls us to do what God wants us to do, we will have a desire for it, I really have not experienced that often. And then I feel bad because I think, well, is it me? Is it? But if you read the Bible, most people in the Bible that God calls to something, it's not like they have this huge desire for it. So I don't feel so bad about that. But I didn't I didn't want to be there. So I went, I just, one day, I hadn't unpacked any of my boxes. I'd been there a bit, and I hadn't unpacked any of my boxes or anything. And I was so unhappy and so miserable. I really got to the point where I felt the pressure of so much. I felt like I was going to die. It's just what it felt like to me. And so I was like, okay, God and I need to have this out. Because I was doing the whole thing that everybody does where it's just like, I'm blessed. God is so good. Life is so, the Lord gives me so much. And they just speak positive all the time to the point where you don't feel like you can speak negative, that your pain and your grief is somehow a lack of faith. So I think I had been doing that, but I was really, really upset. And I was upset with everything, I guess. And so I went into my closet. It was this big walk-in closet. I took my pillow. I went into my closet and I got on my knees. And the Lord said to me, okay, Rivka, he said, I know you're angry with me. You know you're angry with me. I need you to tell me what. I need you to tell me. And so I was angry with the Lord about things that I didn't even realize I was angry about that were just coming right out of me. It went all the way back to when I was a little girl, like little girl, that I was completely unaware of. And I just began to unload my grievances, my anger. My grandfather had passed away and I adored my grandfather. I was angry about that. I was angry that I had to move to Israel. I was angry I had to leave Israel. I was like angry about so many things. And the Lord just let me completely just vent. And he said to me, do you love me? And I said, yes, I love you. And he said, I'm trying to remember now because my brain is like all fuzzy. But he said, like, do you love me? He asked me 3 times, do you love me? And I said, yes, I love you. And he said, then serve me. And I said, I am going to serve you. And he said, he asked me for my will. He asked me for my choices. He asked me for everything, that everything moving forward from that moment on, he wanted to be in complete control of. And I said, okay, but you've got to help me because I am miserable. You've got to help me. And in that moment, the Lord filled me with joy. I'd never experienced joy like that. I don't know that I've ever experienced it like that again since then, but it was this joy that so profoundly filled me that I literally I felt like it was pitch black in there. So I don't know, but I felt like I was floating. Like I felt like because I was sitting crisscross applesauce, like whatever. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I lifted up and I was floating. I felt such a release of everything. And then I knew my time with the Lord was over. It had been 3 hours at that point, and I was unaware that it had been 3 hours. And I came outside my closet, and everything looked different. The sunshine was different. My room looked different. Nothing had changed, but I had changed, and everything was different. And then the next weekend, I met you. And, the rest is history.
The rest is history.
So So that's you know, and I still have my moments with the Lord where I'm just very, very human. I don't ever feel condemned by the Lord for frustration or anger or my humanity.
Yeah.
He's my friend who loves me unconditionally. And even if I didn't agree, even when I'm angry about something, even if I was like, I don't like any of this, what I do know and what I do believe is that he is the sovereign God of the universe. So it's really irrelevant, honestly, what I think and how I feel about things because he's God. So ultimately, whatever he wants, that's it.
He knows
Done.
better.
He knows better, right? My flesh struggles with it. My spirit is always willing, but my flesh really drags her feet.
So do our kids, right? They don't think we know better,
Right, yeah.
right? But we know better.
We do.
He knows better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
and so I think even in that, just it's coming to this place of responding to the prompting of the Lord by surrendering your anger, surrendering the bitterness, surrendering your will, and saying, okay, I release it, I let go, I lift my life to you, and yeah, you have these two different experiences that are not they're not like this textbook ABC, accept, believe.
Each one of us is
admit,
so
believe,
different.
confess. It's not about this. It's about ultimately surrendering your life to the Lord, putting your faith and letting Yeshua be Lord of your life. But He works with us in different ways, and so it's not everyone doesn't have the same experience, and that's the beauty of it.
Right. I mean, nobody has the same experience in the same family.
Yeah.
We are all just very different. So in the same way, I have to be a different mother to each one of my 5 children.
Yeah.
God deals with each one of us the same. He loves us the same. He keeps the same standards, but because he loves us, he works with us where we're at. And I admire your good boy life, like the whole life long. I think that's fabulous. And
6th, 7th, and 8th grade was
right. Well,
it was real.
it was absolutely it was real.
It
I
was
think
real. It
Giovanni's
was
3-year-old experience was
It was
absolutely
real rebellion.
real.
I don't care what anybody says. I know I know I wasn't walking with the Lord. I may have been a kid, but I was willfully not walking with the Lord, but He was gracious to me, and there's no.
I don't think there's anyone.
There's no scars from it,
right. I don't think that there's anyone that's too young for the Lord to totally be there for and walk with them through things, and none of us are too old to
where it's too late.
Where it's too late, right? Or has done too much to where it's too late.
All right. Well. Well, that was fun.
That was a deep one this week.
Yeah.
Wow.
What was our first question again?
Yeah, I don't even remember. What was that? It was quick.
Ah,
right.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Discipline and empathy. All right. Well, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.